I get anime recommendations all the time. Guy in the comments who wants that Big O video, I see you. But Frieren, something about Frieren made everybody want to tell me to watch it. Something about it made them think about me, and after watching the entirety of the show and reading well into the manga, I'm not exactly sure how I feel about that. I don't think it's a bad thing, because not to bury the lead or anything, but it's actually a really amazing anime. I was actually talking to Jeff from Mother's Basement last year, and even he was like, yo dude, there's this anime coming out, it's called Frieren, it's about blah blah blah, and dude, you're gonna love it. And yeah, it did sound like something I would like, it sounded like something I would watch, but I couldn't see why not only he and like people on socials and in my Patreon were like, Mike, you specifically need to watch Frieren. So naturally I dragged my feet because I'm unreliable and inconsistent. Then I watched the trailer and I was like, okay, wow, this looks like an emotional show. So I continued to drag my feet. But then I eventually watched it. So here you go, internet, you made me watch Frieren. You wanted this video. So without further ado, let's get into it. Do you have a face? Do you have a dad? Does that dad have a face? If you answered yes to one of these three questions, I've got the perfect thing just for you. This Father's Day, don't be the kid that comes up with another stupid mug or nothing at all. Plan ahead and get your dad something nice, or get something nice for yourself. This video is sponsored by Manscaped, and guess what? They actually do more than just you downstairs. Whether it's for you or your dad, make sure that you check out Manscaped's Handyman. This little compact electric shaver is perfect for a closer, smoother shave, and believe me, I've had a lot of trouble with these before, but this one, just works so good. It's also airplane safe as well, which comes in handy if you're going to be traveling, and you won't be losing it to the TSA. It's waterproof and can be rinsed off in the sink, which makes it super easy to use and definitely convenient. We all know that cleaning up is the worst part of shaving. Don't forget about the Weed Whacker 2.0 nose and ear trimmer, which even works with my nose ring. This guy is a lifesaver for people with the hairy noses, and we all know that we're sick of looking at your dad's ear hair. So whether you're looking for yourself or you're looking for a Father's Day present, Manscaped has got it all. So get something new and unique, and honestly, something that comes in like some really nice packaging, like it looks legitimate, feels legitimate, charges simply. Get it for your dad. Get it for you. Out of the many sponsorships we've done, these are tools that I actually use literally all the time. So head over to manscaped.com and get 20% off plus free international shipping when you use our promo code BonsaiPop. That is code BonsaiPop at checkout. With that said and done, let's get back to the video. So a few years back, this channel was better known for, I think, a more emotionally in-depth and nuanced take on AniTube. And I really liked making those videos. It was honestly what came naturally to me. But then a bunch of channels kind of came up doing the same thing, and I watched a lot of that content, and I really didn't like it. And looking back on that now, I think it really had an effect on me. I was subconsciously worried that I was making cringe like they were. So I stepped off the gas a bit and started doing stuff differently. But I also think at the same time, it's been a very difficult couple of years. And if you watch our videos, like really watch our videos, and especially if you listen to the podcast, I think you know that, because our videos are meant to be watched in order. Yes, our videos cover anime, they can be enjoyed as a singular piece, but together they tell a story about me and a story about the people and the world around me. And some people hate it, but I insert myself into my videos. Each and every single one of them is personal. I use them to get out my feelings at the time of writing. I use them to deal with what's going on around me, but these past couple of years, I have been emotionally unavailable. So part of the reason that I dragged my feet on Frieren was because I wasn't sure if I was ready for an anime that was going to take emotional availability or vulnerability. But the show, it kept coming up. It looked like I was going to be unable to escape this show, so eventually I sat down and watched it. And then I stopped watching it because I got bored, and then I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this, I'm really gonna watch it, and I ended up loving it. So Frieren is about an emotionally stunted elf, which sounds like it could go any way you want it to, right? I mean, funny, sad, whatever, take your pick. But instead, this manga turned anime decides to go into the deep introspection route, and the subtitle Beyond Journey's End is the crux. Over the last decade, we have been so inundated with defeat the devil lord anime, it is ridiculous. However, this one starts after Frieren and her party defeat the Demon King. As of right now, we haven't even seen the Demon King in the anime. I think we all see what they've done here. Frieren the elf mage, Aizen the warrior dwarf, the human priest Heiter, and the hero Himmel have already succeeded in their 10-year journey to the land of demons and finally defeated the one that ruled them all. They've become champions of the kingdom to be praised till the end of time. 10 years though is a long time to spend with a person, let alone 3 other people, let alone every single day. I mean, most of us are lucky to have someone outside of our family who we've been able to maintain a constant relationship with for over 10 years. My fiance and I are going to be celebrating our 11th anniversary in August, which means I've been with her for a third of my life. I know her better than anyone in the world, and of course vice versa. And while we obviously have a special relationship, spending every day with someone for 10 years really is something. For Frieren's party, it was the journey, the experience, the friendships of a lifetime. For all of them, seemingly except Frieren. The last thing they all do together as a party is watch a once every 50 years meteor shower, and she complains about how it's difficult to see in the city, saying she knows a much better place to watch it. And then she says when it comes around again, she'll bring them all to the good spot. And of course, Himmel and Heiter go all goggle-eyed over Frieren's characteristic lack of understanding about humanity. For her, the journey was less than 1/100th of her life. That's 1/100th of the life she has already lived so far. It was a flash in the pan. I mean, what's another 50 years? She'll see you then. So the party disassembles the next day, with Frieren going out for a century or so to pick up more spells. And that's her hobby, that's what she does. Though she does remember to stop back by 50 years later to bring her companions to the spot she mentioned in order to watch the meteor shower. However, Himmel, the once stalwart hero of the world, has become a shriveled old man. He's virtually unrecognizable apart from his eyes and beauty mark. Heiter, too, has become quite old, and the two can't even fight in this, their final adventure together. Even the long-lived dwarf Aizen admits he can't fight with his axe anymore. And soon after this last adventure, Himmel passes away from advanced age, leaving his party to attend his funeral. And it isn't until Himmel is in the ground that Frieren has an emotional moment, realizing that she made a mistake. She feels like she never really knew Himmel. She frivolously spent all the time he had left wandering around for no real reason other than to selfishly chase her hobby. She tearfully decides she's going to get to know humanity better, whatever that means. So again, it did take me 2 tries to get into this anime. And we've talked about this before, but anime can ask a lot from its audience at times. A lot of shows can take a few episodes to get to the point or even get rolling, you know what I mean? Frieren is like that. It's slow. The English dub is very, I don't know if dour is the right word, but they're really leaning into that kind of relaxed feel, maybe a little too hard. And the music is, well, a lot like what you're hearing in this video. Frieren takes its time, and that is completely 100% on purpose. Because Frieren, you see, has all the time in the world. We don't ever find out exactly how old she is, but she's over 1,000 years old at minimum, likely much older. Another elf later in the series puts it perfectly. We don't have lives so much as eternities. So naturally, she's in no hurry to do anything. She'll take 6 months to look for attack in a 20 square mile field. I mean, what's it matter? To her, time is literally irrelevant. Except that it's not. She just hasn't really figured that out yet. We've talked before on the channel about the flip side of a coin, making said coin complete. You know, the idea that a coin with one side can't exist. So following that logic, something can't exist without its equal and opposite. Therefore, life without death can't exist. Living forever is not living, it's existing. That realm is meant for the gods, if they're real or not, whatever. But Frieren is not a god. She's just an elf. They may live astoundingly long lives to a human, but they die, and because of that, Frieren is inescapably bound to the passage of time and the others that dwell within time. And time is a nasty thing. No matter what we do, time will inevitably catch up to us, to our friends and family, our homes, and everything we love. It will erode the universe around it and cause calamity, from your hometown becoming unrecognizable to the eventual heat death of the universe. Time is inescapable, cruel, unforgiving, and relentless. However, the measurement of time is just a tool for intelligent beings to utilize this concept. Time's one of those things that dials in and out, seemingly at random. I myself once got into a car accident with my friends, and we really should have died. It was really bad. But when I saw that tree coming and the truck went flying, I had all the time in the world to think about what it was going to be like when we hit the ground, in what was likely less than a second. On the flip side, as I've gotten older, time seems to be flying by. These past few years have gone by so fast, but at the same time, I haven't really been doing much. Mostly working and laying in bed, barely existing. Years peppered by video releases, the ups and downs of videos failing or succeeding, but that bed sucked me in more and more. I was wasting my time, killing my time. Wake me up when shit's better, right? Well, shit never got better. But part of what makes that so frustrating is knowing that I only have so much time. That time is always ticking down on my life, on your life, on our era. Eventually, we're just going to be the subject of memes that are holographically 3D projected out of, Generation Twinkle Toes' brain chips. So in that way, I guess we can forgive Frieren for not quite getting humanity. We live with a desperation, a fear that we won't be able to accomplish what we want to do before our short, tiny lives are snuffed out by time. Even the world-changing events we've lived through will become footnotes in a history book that kids won't pay attention to 100 years from now. Just another war, another plague. Humanity will have moved on at the breakneck speed we've been exponentially increasing over the past 500 years or so. And I know all of this sounds pretty depressing and miserable, right? But time and its passage is completely up to your point of view. It's really easy to get sucked into the void at the end of the road, that inevitable rusting of who we once were, but times are changing. Hell, both presidential candidates are the oldest in history and can't help but uncontrollably shit their pants all the time. If they can do that and be president, then we should all be able to live into our 110s. But kidding aside, time is what we make it through our perspective, right? Frieren may burn 6 months trying to build a 20-foot house of cards on a wind farm, but imagine if she cherished every single second of it. That's the difference. That's controlling time. And sometimes, as we'll see, it happens by accident. So 20 years after the death of Himmel, Frieren goes to pour some booze on Heiter's grave, assuming that he's dead, only to find the old priest alive and harboring an orphan girl named Fern. And I guess we can all surmise that at this point, Frieren still hasn't figured out how to get to know humanity, seeing as she probably forgot Heiter could have died at any time within the past 2 decades. However, fate is a funny thing, and despite the priest being as unpious as they come, he's lived well into old age. It also just so happens that this young girl he's rescued is well suited for magic, so he asks Frieren to take her as an apprentice. However, she declines, stating that Fern would just get in the way and eventually die. It wouldn't be worth her time. So instead, Heiter asks the mage to translate an old grimoire that may have spells to elongate a lifespan. Admitting that it'd take her a few months, Frieren decides to stay. She also agrees to teach Fern magic while she's there. And of course, it's Fern who begins to open Frieren up to humanity. The girl is singularly focused on the goal of blowing up a faraway boulder, and Heiter said that if she can do it, she will officially be a proper mage. And Frieren constantly tells Fern to take her time, but eventually Fern says that she has to do it as quickly as possible because Heiter doesn't have much time left. She wants to show him that she's become a proper mage and make him proud before he dies. And this kind of slaps Frieren in the face, especially since Heiter had recently collapsed and has become bedridden. And he later asks Frieren to take Fern now that she's a proper mage and leave him to die. Frieren agrees to take Fern but refuses to leave, telling him that Fern is prepared for him to pass and has been, and through tears, she says he should focus on making as many memories with her as he can before that happens. She then asks Heiter why he saved Fern, and after looking back in his memories, he states that it's because that's what Himmel the hero would have done. And later, while thinking to herself, Frieren remarks that Himmel would be a good guiding voice for her to follow as well. And this is when the memories really start coming back. Chancing upon a statue of Himmel in a town the party saved over 70 years ago, Frieren begins a quest to find a flower called Blue Moon Weed that disappeared from the area decades ago. At least according to an old woman who was there when Himmel had saved the village. Frieren wants this flower in particular because she remembered Himmel saying how much he loved it, how it grew around his hometown, and how he wanted to show it to her one day. And that on its own seems pretty innocuous unless you think about it. I mean, what a specific memory. For someone who's been alive for over a millennia, to remember something so small from 70 years in the past is really something, and how and why this particular memory stuck with Frieren is unknown, but it was clearly very important to her. And I'm not gonna lie, again, my first watch through, I was really bored at this point. But going back through after seeing where things go, this really stuck with me. It made me think. There are so many memories that I have from ridiculously long ago. Friends back in elementary school, there's this one kid, and he made up a song on the bus, and I still remember the song word for word. I haven't talked to this kid in 25 years. I don't know if he's alive or dead. I don't remember any sleepovers we had. I don't remember any specific conversations. I do remember him chasing pigeons on a field trip because he was enamored with them, and I remember this song. I don't know why. And I used to feel really weird about things like that, and I still do, right? Like, why do I have these like random memories that come back that I think about from time to time? I mean, the people, they're not thinking about me. But I actually found out a couple years back that that's not necessarily true. I ran into a friend that I had known since first grade, but hadn't talked to in well over a decade. And she remembered things that I did and said that are completely gone from my mind. She was paying attention, or maybe the things I did just impacted her the same way that stupid song impacted me. I didn't even know she liked me that much. And she's gay, so it's not like that, you know what I mean? You just never know what you mean to somebody unless they tell you, and of course, vice versa. This comes up later in the series as well, in a very interesting way, but we're gonna get there. We're taking our time, right? So it turns out when I was talking about Frieren single-mindedly searching for attack in a field for 6 months, I wasn't really exaggerating at all. She literally drags poor Fern around the woods for 6 months looking for this flower. And when Fern explains to the old lady that she's afraid Frieren is going to be looking for the next decade without a single care, the woman explains to her that to Frieren, both of them are just children, that she's so mature she can handle Fern voicing her concerns. And when Fern does just that, Frieren says that she realizes now that her time is not her own anymore. And it's at this point that we get to see for the first time how wise the elf is. She decides to follow a seed rat who's been eating a derivative of the blue moon weed to one of its hiding spots, knowing that they stash their food and generally forget about it. And way up high in a tower, blue moon weed is growing freely. Now, so far I've neglected to talk about Frieren's abilities because they haven't really been important up until now. But on top of the mage being in the hero's party and having defeated the Demon King, she is just incredibly powerful anyway. Incalculably so. However, she really only likes weird spells, pointless ones in the eyes of most mages. All the folk magic she goes around collecting is basically a joke. A spell for perfectly wiping your nose. A spell for healing your split ends. However, the field of flowers she can create, her party liked that. Particularly Himmel, who praised her for it. He was the first person to ever do so. And this seemingly small gesture meant more to her than even she knew, and she remembered it. It goes to show that little things like that can go a long way. So by the next episode, it's been 7 years since Frieren picked up Fern and 27 years since the death of Himmel. It's Fern's birthday, and Frieren gets her a present even though Fern forgot what day it was. It's a hairpiece that she will wear for the rest of the series, but Frieren admits that she still feels like she doesn't know anything about Fern. However, Fern tells her that just trying to understand her and get to know her means the world. And like the last episode, it's the little moments like this that are peppered throughout Frieren that you don't really notice until you get a better picture of the show, but they're super important. The manga is one of those rare productions where the writer and illustrator are two different people, and there isn't a lot of information on either of them, but writer Kanehito Yamada clearly had a goal when writing this series, and I don't know if they're a man or a woman, how old they are, nothing. But what you can glean from the writing is a delicate wisdom about human communication. The funny thing is, I don't know which character they put themselves in, right? So like if I was to write a book, I know that there would be one character that I would inject myself into. Maybe that sounds like an ego thing, but all we really have is our own perspective and experiences. Writing yourself into a character allows you to ground the story and make it believable. You can only go so far with a character that you created that has no part of you in it. That's part of the reason why good writers are so good, is that they can make realistic characters in any setting. And following that logic, naturally the next step would be to populate the world with characters you know. And I think that's why it's particularly difficult to write good villains, and it's because we may know shitty people, but it's very unlikely that we know anybody or anything that is truly evil. You can't have good villains without making them relatable, like Darth Vader, for instance. In the first film, he's just this aloof, cold, evil guy who grinds anything under his boot for the justice and law of the Empire, right? And then in Empire, you learn that he's a father. You learn that he has his own ambitions and motivations, that he's not completely loyal to the Emperor. And of course, by Jedi, you kind of get the whole picture, right? There's an arc for him. He has a personality. He's not just evil for the sake of being evil. And that's partially why he's one of the best known villains in pop culture to this day. But again, for Frieren, it's hard to tell whether Yamada feels more like Frieren or the people around her, whether they're the one who needs communication and praise, or whether they're the one who has trouble communicating themselves. And why it's so hard to decide one way or another is because both sides of that coin are represented so well and so subtly as the story goes on. But finally, we are introduced to Zoltrak. Frieren and Fern end up in a town where the hero's party sealed a greater demon away during their travels, and at the time, the demon was too strong to defeat, but Frieren is now ready. We learn that magic is a continuous study. It's something that grows and changes like a science. Spells can be analyzed and acquired, strengthened, and passed along. Zoltrak was a spell created by this greater demon that Frieren sealed away, and at the time, it was the strongest attack magic ever seen. But now, it's basic offensive magic wielded by humans. Because of its power, humanity also needed to create defensive magic to block the attack. So since Zoltrak is now basic offensive magic, the magic to block it is now basic defensive magic. In the end, this demon that even Frieren couldn't best 80 years ago can't defend itself at all and is killed by its own spell. And while this is cool and the first time the series hints that it may have some teeth, it also goes to show how humanity's desperation causes rapid innovation. When Qual is revived, he finds that he's been sealed for 80 years, which for him and Frieren is no time at all, but in 80 years, humans go from World War II radio broadcasts to streaming 4K television over the internet into a device we can hold in our pockets. Now, I don't know if you're lucky enough to have old people in your lives. I myself have both sets of my grandparents still, and my great-grandmother was 100 when she died. I was like 11 at the time. My mom's parents are in their 90s, but even my dad's parents have trouble keeping up sometimes, and they're in their 70s. Humanity truly moves at a breakneck pace, and even we get left behind during our own lifetimes. My maternal grandfather was a chemistry professor of grad students at the University of Massachusetts Amherst for like over 40 years. A while back I was talking to him about something, I don't remember what it was, but he turned to me and he looked at me and he said, "Michael, I've spent my entire life learning and studying. I don't ever want to learn anything ever again. I'm done." My grandfather is a quiet man. He's a prolific piano player with perfect pitch, but would never play in front of anyone but family. He putters about his land and reads the newspaper, watches the Red Sox and the PGA Tour. He loves big band and Sinatra. He goes to the Catholic Church every Sunday, and he can't eat food with spice on it other than salt. His office is full of trinkets collected over the decades, science tools from 30 years before I was even born. He is a person from another time. A time where being a college graduate meant everything. A time when a person could have 6 kids and a house on one income. A time before Kennedy was shot, before King changed civil rights, before Vietnam, before Reagan, before 9/11. But time has left him behind, and he accepts it. But during that time, he also taught me a lot. He showed me a lot of things. Things like proper table etiquette, the phonograph, classic cartoons like Heckle and Jekyll, things that are so old a lot of people my age didn't experience them. I mean, black and white TVs with rabbit ears and turn dials, VCRs that pop up instead of ejecting from the front, channel boxes. But he's done. He's been done. His friends are dead, so is most of his family. He's outlived and outlasted them all. I think the last part of the human journey is finally accepting when our time has passed, when our era has officially come to an end. And it's not a bad thing. He had his adventures in Korea and Japan and China and Washington, D.C., moving around the country. His childhood traveling back and forth from his home in Canada to Massachusetts. He remembers his friends and his parents and his cousins and his co-workers. But at this point, they're just memories. So he reads the paper and he watches the Red Sox and he putts around his land. And he waits for me to come visit. But each time, he's a little bit quieter than he was before. Now, by episode 4, I was getting pretty sick and tired of watching mostly nothing happen. I am not a big slice of life guy. I know we've covered some before, like Kotaro Lives Alone. But I think most people think that I mostly watch classic anime, which isn't necessarily wrong. However, when I'm just watching to relax, I watch absolute garbage. For example, I recently rewatched all of Konosuba for the 8th time, started rewatching Dragon Ball for I can't even count how many times I've seen that, Rising of the Shield Hero Season 2, Moshiko Tensei for the 3rd time, The Wrong Way to Use Healing Magic, the new Digimon remake, Shangri-La Frontier, Solo Leveling. I rewatched all of Danmachi for the 3rd time, Reborn as a Vending Machine, you get it. Not a lot of slice of life in there. Thankfully, episode 4 of Frieren is when the plot kicks in and the series gets a direction. Frieren decides to visit Aizen with Fern, and she finds out that he and Heiter had kept up through letters until Heiter had passed away. And Frieren remarks that Aizen is apparently more friendly than he looks, but he says perhaps it's just her who isn't friendly. Regardless, he and Heiter have found a lead on a work written by the legendary mage Flamme. Now, this isn't the first time Flamme has come up, but according to Frieren, almost all of the mage's supposed works and grimoires are fakes. But this one, however, has a legitimate chance of being real. Now, all they have to do is find a tree in a forest. This, of course, alarms Fern, who's had plenty of time by now to know that Frieren could look literally forever, but Frieren remarks that Fern doesn't like it when she does things leisurely, so they should work quickly. And at this, Aizen is taken aback, saying that Frieren has changed. She's never cared about anyone's time before. She says it's just because Fern is scary when she gets mad. But when Fern eventually discovers the tree, Aizen admits that the reason for this quest is because he feels bad for Frieren. He feels bad for Himmel too. It was clear that at his funeral, Frieren had regrets, that she wanted to have gotten to know Himmel better. So Heiter and Aizen researched these notes from Flamme in particular. Supposedly, they reveal the location of a place where you can speak with the dead. Heiter and Aizen want to help Frieren get over her pain. And this is when we learn that Frieren was the student of the legendary Flamme herself. These ancient notes were left specifically for her. Flamme knew her student well and knew that one day she would make a mistake and wish she got to know the people around her better. And when that time came, that she would come back to the tree, and here she is. According to the notes, at World's End, Flamme found the place humans call heaven. There, she spoke with the dead, her friends from long ago. And earlier in this episode, there was a momentary flashback where Frieren recalled Heiter praying over some graves, and the heroes' party had a discussion about heaven and whether or not it's real. And Heiter says, despite being a priest, he doesn't know. However, given the alternative, the endless void of non-existence, he thinks heaven is a happier thought, more convenient. Aizen and Himmel agree and pray with Heiter, and Frieren follows suit. Now, faced with what her teacher left her 1,000 years ago, Frieren decides to have a little faith and sets off for heaven with Fern to talk to Himmel and Heiter one last time. And on their way back to Aizen's house, Frieren is sleeping, so Aizen asks Fern how she is as a teacher, and Fern admits that Frieren seems much more interested in her search to get to know her old party more than she is in Fern, that she seems indifferent to her presence, but that she always gets her a birthday present. Fern admits that she doesn't really know what goes on in Frieren's mind. Aizen looks back to the night of the meteor shower in the capital when Frieren told her friends that she'd be leaving alone. He had asked her if she'd be taking a student, to which she said no. No matter how much Frieren could teach a student, they would eventually just die. And Aizen tells her that that's not how relationships work. And it's never specifically stated, but I think at this point it's pretty obvious that somewhere inside, Frieren didn't want to get to know anybody. She didn't want to get attached because to her, having a friend is kind of like the choice we make when we get a dog. We go into that assuming that we are going to outlive our friend, that we're welcoming in a new family member that is inevitably going to die within 20 years. For some people, knowing that that pain will inevitably come, they won't get a pet. But this choice neglects the fact that life expectancy is just that. It's an expectancy, not a guarantee. Just because you're expected to outlive an animal doesn't mean that you are going to. So in that case, why deny yourself the happiness that a dog could bring just because you think you're going to outlive it? Like Eisen said, it's not how relationships work. However, Frieren's existence is one of constant loss. She, more than almost any other being, is acutely aware that eventually all things disappear. They are then replaced with new things, which will also inevitably disappear as well. And I think some of us understand that better than others. Some have internalized it, some fear it. The entire idea of conservatism, a major part of our modern social and political strife, is based on the fear of change. The idea is in the name: to conserve, to keep something as it is, to hold on to traditions and values from the past. But things are always changing. Old things die, new things appear, and then they die as well. To fight against that is an impossible battle. The only way to stave off inevitable change is to isolate it. But isolation is stagnation, and stagnation leads to rot. I mentioned earlier that it's hard for me to pinpoint which side of the characterization Yamada lands on in this manga. Is Yamada Frieren or is Yamada Himmel? Personally, I tend to relate to Frieren, but in my life I've met people that are completely different from me, and they need things I never would have considered, much like a lot of the characters in the rest of this cast. The more time passes by, the more I've been able to see my own faults. I've also been, trying to do the therapy thing, get my head screwed on right. But as I said earlier, these past couple years, I've been more or less bedridden. I filled my life with the endless consumption of content in order to not have to think. So I didn't have to face myself and my own problems. And I know lots of people look at me and are like, this guy's entire existence and livelihood is based on him being on camera and narrating and being a social presence. He must be this way. But how I write and how I communicate are totally different. When I can sit down and think and write out my words and put all my thoughts together like pieces of a puzzle, I guess I can be eloquent enough to garner 275,000 subscribers on a social media platform. But that's not who I am. That's not how I am. I'm actually really shy. I don't like meeting new people. I don't like talking to new people. I don't like going places where I'm going to have to deal with somebody I don't know. And a lot of people who think they know me would think that that's a lie. But I've been conditioned my entire life to act a certain way, and I'm very convincing. But if you're really close to me, then you probably know that I don't have a lot of friends. And the friends that I do have are endlessly patient people who don't get the praise that they deserve because I don't know how to praise people. I am inconsistent, unreliable. I will 100% disappear on you. I will dodge your calls. I will not answer your texts. I will make up white lies to soften the blow of bailing on you. I will stay off the internet so you can't find me. I'm not comfortable being close to people because every time I had gotten close to people, I got hurt, or they died, or they changed, or they preferred someone else over me. And I can tell you this and I can be like this because I can't see you. I don't know you. Most of you are a digit in the bottom left corner of this video. You don't comment, you don't join the Patreon, you're just a passive viewer. I never get to hear your opinion. Here on your screen, it's really just me here alone. And it always has been. Ever since I started working on YouTube in 2016, it's been me in my room alone. And then it was me in my chair alone. And then it was me in my bed alone. The last two in-person friends that I had totally screwed me over. One of them went full junkie and just stopped paying the rent for like 3 months, which meant that he was taking my rent money, and then he told the landlord that I wasn't paying rent. The second let me freeze for an entire winter and then allowed their mother to evict me while I was visiting Tyler in Oregon. Meanwhile, I was desperately trying to take care of my very ill fiance who really needed stability, and the other roommate living with us was a heroin addict who had his dealer and the dealer's dog living in his room. So yeah, I'm not like super keen on making new friends, but I can't help but think now that I'm partly to blame. I know I didn't communicate well. I never told my friends how I felt, at least not the good things. I never told them how much I appreciated that they were my friends, or how much I appreciated the things that they did for me. I never praised them. I never even told them that I liked them. Instead, I complained and I joked around because I assumed all that other stuff was implied. I never told them that I was worried about them or that I noticed their behaviors changing because I was scared that they would get mad at me. I never told them I was concerned. Instead, I complained and I joked, always joking around and never communicating. It's awkward for me, and up until recently, it's not something I ever really thought about. So I get Frieren's aloofness. This is what happens when you've seen shit. Personally, I've seen some shit, and when you go through a lot and the people around you haven't, it tends to alienate you. I mean, how could they possibly understand? How could they begin to conceive the reason you are the way you are on the inside? Why not just make it easier on them and joke around? Why not just make it easier on yourself and stay distant? Why not answer the text and just say you don't feel good and can't talk and we'll get back to them when you do? Maybe they won't accept who you really are. Maybe they won't accept your flaws or your weaknesses or your negative personality traits. Maybe they'll take it personally when you disappear on them. Maybe it's not always them. Maybe it's also you. Maybe it's me. So I brought up praise a while back, and that's because it's a big part of this series. Throughout Frieren, we see all kinds of different characters that have different needs and personalities. And Fern, for instance, is young and has a bit of a temper, but it's not an explosive one. She doesn't require a ton of maintenance except an apology when she feels she requires one. And she's shy and conservative and generally goes with the flow as long as things don't get ridiculous. Frieren, on the other hand, can be described as cold and aloof. But that coldness is likely a result of her advanced age. She only speaks when she really needs to, she reveals what's important when it's important, and doesn't overshare. On the flip side, though, she could be incredibly immature. She sleeps late, misses appointments, and her curiosity always lands her inside the mouth of a dungeon mimic without fail. And she relies on Fern to get her breakfast and do her hair and get her out of bed every single morning. Now, in episode 5, we meet Stark, who becomes the party's warrior. He's also the ex-student of Eisen. He is a stupidly strong coward who doesn't respond directly to encouragement. Instead, he needs to find his own way by being tricked into performing and finding his own strength in the moment. His dragon to slay is conquering his fear through resolve. I'm sure you might have seen what I did there. He doesn't deal with people being mad at him well and will stress out about it because he doesn't know what he did wrong. On the other hand, though, he's incredibly friendly and everybody loves him the second they meet him. Now, things get even crazier when we are introduced to the maniacal first-class mages and the entire exam arc, but even then we are slowly taught throughout the entire series that no matter who you are, people need praise. Of course, praising people is not something that I'm good at. I can actually blame this one on being raised wrong, but being praised and praising people was not something that I was ever taught or shown how to do, really. Whether I did a good job or not, things that were expected of me were expected of me. Doing it wasn't praiseworthy, even if I did it really well. The expectations that you're going to do a perfect job cleaning the house is the same thing as expecting that you're going to eat that day, which made school kind of shitty because being reprimanded is always on the block, but I was expected to excel. So naturally, I landed myself a partner who requires praise and affirmation. At first, I legitimately thought she was a little nuts, I'm not gonna lie. I had never met someone before who was so able to admit that they need those things. To someone raised like me, it sounded totally ridiculous. Like, what, you need me to praise you every time you do something like wash the dishes and tell you all the good things I think about you every once in a while and tell you you're pretty like every single day? Well, yeah. And I'm sure some of you bristled when I said I was raised wrong, and honestly, you're totally fair to have felt that way. Being raised wrong is not an excuse to not change. Yes, it can impede your ability to do so, or it can mess up your view on what healthy human interactions are, but once you acknowledge that you have a problem, it's your responsibility to fix it. But it doesn't mean it's easy. I still forget a lot, and I'm not good at praising anyone else, especially myself. And I'm also not good at taking praise either. It makes me feel extremely awkward, but everybody deserves praise. Praising people isn't a weakness, nor is needing to be praised. And while we continually learn this throughout the show, it really comes out later in the series in episode 18 in a scene between Lawine and Kane. Lawine starts a discussion with, "If you don't have the courage to do it, do you want me to kick you?" Which honestly sounds hauntingly familiar. But Kane says that Lawine is always so mean to her, that Kane is the kind of person who grows with praise. And Lawine says that's what happens when you grow up being babied by kind parents. And this was literally my mindset at a certain point, that people who needed praise were soft. But then Luwin says that if it'll help Kane fly, she will be as nice as Kane wants, which, given from what we've seen from Luwin so far in this series, was a huge thing. People with the do it or I'll spank you mentality are generally not so easy to flip into being like, oh yeah, you're great. So Kane asks her to name her strengths. And after a while and more asking, Luwin eventually has to rack her brain. But I've literally been there in that moment, sitting there trying to be like, oh, well, this is the thing that I like. This is something that means a lot to me because, you know, I just don't think about voicing that kind of stuff all the time. But Kane isn't being soft. It's just honestly easy to forget the good things about yourself, your self-worth, and what you mean to other people. A lot of you, I mean, you don't know what you mean to another person unless they tell you. And at this point, through a lot of years of experience and developing, I think that it's honestly stronger to admit when you do need praise and affirmation than it is to forge ahead blindly without it. For me, it's still easier to give than ask, but I'm working on it. But this is what Frieren is all about. It's about these small moments with characters who are just incredibly flawed and human. It's about relationships and perspective, and most importantly, it constantly reminds you of what you're good at and what you need to work on in order to communicate. The last thing that any of us wants is someone to disappear forever before we tell them how we really feel. And I bet the majority of us have already had that happen. But that's not what it's all about, because Frieren actually has some serious teeth, which was something that I was worried about as time went on in the beginning there. Again, I'm not a huge slice of lifer, I need a little spice in my anime, and Frieren has it. I just didn't know where to talk about it in the script because there's just so much good stuff in here. So Frieren Fern and Stark are off at this point and have a direction. They're headed to heaven, a journey that will coincidentally take them along a very similar path that Frieren and the Heroes Party took more than 80 years prior. And this is a new party, and they needed a warrior for a reason. It's not an easy journey to the north. There will be many monsters and other adversaries to overcome on the way. However, and especially if you read the manga, 90% of these monster encounters are over in a panel or two. What really stops everything is when a demon shows up. Now, in the world of Frieren, demons are a society. They had a king and land and everything. They look very much like humans, but live long lives like elves and practice their own brand of magic. They are intelligent and eloquent, but absolutely evil to the core. They're just full on evil. Their only desire is to survive and kill humans. Magic like hypnosis magic doesn't work on them because their brains are wired so incredibly different from a human's that the spells just don't communicate. What makes them worse is that they are complete psychotic sociopaths, literally Patrick Bateman stuff. They learn the ways of humans but lack any of the empathy or emotions to coexist with them in any way. They lie instinctively and prey on humanity's sympathies only as a way to survive and kill more. And when we first meet one, the show flips on its head. Here's a story about all this emotion and communication and heart, and here comes a new character or type of character in this story. I mean, they gotta be redeemable in some way, right? Turns out no. And Frieren is absolutely stone cold about demons. So much so that in the moment, you're wondering what the hell is wrong with her. But it turns out she's right. And she continues to be right. Frieren hates demons, but there's absolutely no reason not to. They are irredeemable predators. Not even predators because they don't need to eat humans. They just love to kill them. Exterminating demons from the face of the earth is a goal of Frieren's, and that's why she's known as Frieren the Slayer. Yes, this teeny bopper granny elf is the Slayer, and not like Buffy. She is the cold and ruthless destroyer of demonkind. She's fine to while her days away hunting down folk spells to turn red grapes into green grapes, I don't know. But if a demon crosses her path, she will destroy it as fast as she can with absolute prejudice. But that's not to say that Fern isn't a badass too, or Stark for that matter. Fern has been under Frieren's tutelage for most of her life, and while Frieren doesn't explain a ton, she's been teaching Fern, who mind you already had a ridiculous aptitude for magic, how to defend herself this entire time. In some ways, Fern is more powerful than Frieren. And Stark can kill a dragon all by himself after having his head munched on by said dragon, so I don't think we need to go too far into him. But none of this is really the point. It's more icing on the cake, and a way to get idiots like myself invested enough in the series to fall in love with it, and then go on to read the manga up to its current chapter. But none of this would be possible without the change that happened within Frieren herself. Again, early in the show, she comments on how her journey with Himmel was short, tiny, not even 1/100th of her life. However, that 1/100th changed Frieren forever. Her journey, and more importantly, the people she went on that journey with, changed her forever. And you'll notice that her flashbacks are never about major battles. They're about silly things that happened with her friends. Moments that she remembers because they were the most important parts. Time isn't about duration. It's about what happens within it. A moment, a second could change you forever. A single sentence, a hand offered in help. That's what the series is so desperately trying to convey, that every second is a chance for your life to change and for you to change someone else's. That we should be communicating as much as we can, as best as we can, so nothing important is left unsaid in the end. That no matter how much time you have, it will always be full of little moments that were worth spending it on. And of course, that's easier said than done. Last month, my mother-in-law-to-be passed away. She wasn't even 60 yet, and she was a complicated woman, and the death was complicated as well. It left a lot of people spinning, especially my fiance, who is too young to have lost her mom. But I knew this woman for 10 years, and I never really got to know her. In fact, I hadn't talked to her in a couple years at that point because she had said something about someone I really didn't appreciate. And I've historically been like that, probably because I'm bad at communicating. Rather than say anything, I'll just disappear. It's easier than fighting, but then things like this happen and you realize that you're stupid. This is somebody who, no matter who they are, had a huge impact on the person I'm going to be spending the rest of my life with. And now I no longer have the opportunity to get to know her better. But this event, this all meant that I really had to get out of bed, which honestly was easy because when it comes down to people needing me, that's when I'm there, when it really counts. But for the last few years, that's only when I've been there. Since starting this job, I've been isolated. I've also isolated myself. And as the years went on, I pulled back even farther. It's an easy thing to do when you're, for the most part, working solo. It's not like I can call downstairs to Tyler and be like, yo, dude, check this out. He's in Oregon. But in the week that followed, we started spending time with people. I mean, you kind of have to when someone that close to you passes away. And even though it was super exhausting and super shitty, I ended up feeling better. I felt better when I was around people. I felt better going outside. I felt better just talking to people in real life. And it's not like I haven't tried to get out of this funk before. I got a snowboard and went snowboarding a couple of years ago for the first time in a long time. And I just wasn't physically capable of doing it because I had been, rotting away in this room. So I hurt myself. And then I got really into rollerblading. And then I overestimated myself and really hurt myself. It was all in the same year. That was a bad year. But over this past winter, I decided that I really wanted to play hockey. I never got to do it when I was a kid, so I wanted to start, but I needed to learn how to ice skate. So I got a pair and I spent a lot of time doing that and trying to get back into shape. But honestly, I wasn't taking it seriously enough. I hadn't committed. And the first time that I put my pads on and got out there with a stick and a puck, I thought I was gonna die. I've never been that hot and sweaty and my heart was pounding. I left and I didn't go back for the rest of the season. It was going to take more than I had in me at the time. I needed to work on my cardio. I needed to get my core back. I needed to go on a diet, drop 20 pounds. And I needed to do all of that stuff regularly. But I'm getting better. After that whole fiasco last month, I got my rollerblades out and I started going out regularly and playing street hockey. Now, I'm doing 16 miles of rollerblading every other day or so. I'm doing sit-ups and push-ups and playing street hockey at night, and I even started that stupid fucking diet. I even made plans with someone and followed through with them, and we all had a really good time. And I finally watched Frieren because everybody wanted me to. I still don't know why, because I don't think they had any idea how much it would remind me of all the important things, or that I would be able to see myself in other people I know and all of the characters. But I did, and I guess that's what matters. And that's really what Frieren is about. Because it's obvious, it's so obvious, right? That Himmel loved Frieren with all of his heart, and she just didn't understand. She missed it. She missed a life with him. But now she's starting to understand, and I don't think it's a coincidence that she is on her way to heaven to see him again. And I don't know how this story is going to end, but I know that I just don't want to miss anything anymore. So thank you for watching, and I appreciate it.